Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Param Brahm, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Om Ajnanatimir Andhasya ज्ञानाञ्जन शलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः. Shivam friends, today we will start from chapter 18 in which Lord Ram is talking about denunciation of the body itself. This body of ours that struts about on earth is only a mass of humid entrails and tendons, tending to decay and disease, and to our torment alone. It is neither quiescent nor wholly sentient, neither ignorant nor quite intelligent. Its inherent soul is a wonder, and reason makes it graceful or otherwise. The skeptic is doubtful of its inertness and exercise of intellect, and unreasonable and ignorant people are ever subject to error and illusion. The body is as easily gratified with a little as it is exhausted in an instant. Hence, there is nothing so pitiable, abject, and worthless as our bodies. The face is as frail as a fading flower. Now it shoots forth its teeth like filament, and now it dresses itself with blooming and blushing smiles as blossoms. The body is like a tree. Its arms resemble the branches, the shoulder blades like stems, the teeth are rows of birds, the eye holes like its hollows, and the head is like a big fruit. The ears are like two woodpeckers. The fingers of both hands and feet are like so many leaves of the branches. The diseases are like parasitic plants, and the acts of the body are like axes falling in this tree, which is the seed of the two birds, the soul and intelligence. This shady tree of the body is only the temporary resort of a passing soul, whether it be related or unrelated to anybody, or whether reliable or not. What man is there, O venerable fathers, who would stoop to reflect that each body is repeatedly assumed only to serve as a boat to pass over the sea of the world? Who can rely on this body with any confidence? A body like a forest full of holes abounding in hairs that resemble trees. The body, composed of flesh, nerves, and bones, resembles a drum without any musical sound. Yet I sit watching it like a cat. Our bodies are like trees growing in the forest of the world, bearing the flowers of anxiety and perforated by the worms of sorrow and misery, ridden by the apish mind. The body, with its smiling face, appears like a good plant bearing both good and bad fruit. But it has become home for the snake of greed and crows of anger. Our arms are like the branches of trees, and our open palms like beautiful cluster of flowers. The other limbs are like twigs and leaves continually shaken by the breath of our life. The two legs are the erect stems, and the organs are the seeds of the birds of sense. Its youthful bloom is a shade for the passing traveler of love. The hanging hairs of the head resemble long grass growing on the tree, and egoism, like a vulture, cracks the ear with its hideous shrieks. Our various desires are like the hanging roots, and fibers of a fig tree that seem to support the trunk of its body, but is worn out by labor to become unpleasant. The body is the big home of its owner's ego, and therefore it is of no interest to me whether it lasts or falls. The body linked with its limbs like beast of burden to labor. The home of its mistress greed, painted over by her passions, affords me no delight whatever. This abode of the body, built with its framework of backbone and ribs, and composed of cellular vessels tied together by ropes of the entrails, is no way desirable to me. This mansion of the body, tied with strings of tendons, built with the clay of blood and moisture, and plastered white with old age, is no way suited to my liking. The mind is the architect and master of this bodily dwelling, and our activities are its supports and servants. It is filled with errors and delusions which I don't like. I don't like this dwelling of the body with its bed of pleasure on one side and its childlike cries of pain on the other, and where our evil desires work like its shouting handmaids. I cannot like this body, it is like a pot of filth, full of the foulness of worldly affairs and mouldering under the rust of our ignorance. It is a hovel standing on the two props of our heels, supported by the two posts of our legs. It is no lovely house where the external organs are playing their parts, while its mistress understanding sits inside with her brood of anxieties. It is a hut thatched over with the hairs on the head, decorated with the turrets of the ears, and adorned with jewels on the crest, which I don't like. This house of the body is walled about by all its members and beset by hairs growing on it like ears of grain. It has an empty space of the belly within which I do not lie. This body with its nails has those of spiders, and its entrails growling within like barking dogs, and the internal winds emitting fearful sounds is never delightsome to me. What is this body but a passage for the ceaseless inhaling and breathing out of the vital air? Its eyes are like two windows continually opened and closed by the eyelids. I don't like a mansion such as this. This mansion of the body, with its formidable door of the mouth and ever moving bolt of the tongue and the bars of the teeth, is not pleasant to me. This house of the body, having the whitewash of the ointments on the outer skin, and the machinery of the limbs is in continuous motion, its restless mind, burrowing its base like a mischievous mouse, is not liked by me. Sweet smiles like shining lamps serve to lighten this house of the body for a moment, but it is soon darkened by a cloud of melancholy, wherefore I cannot be pleased with it. This body, the abode of diseases and subject to wrinkles and decay and all kinds of pains, is a mansion with which I am not pleased. I do not like this wilderness of the body, infested by the bears of the senses. It is empty and hollow within, with dark grooves of entrails inside. I am unable, O chief of sages, to drag my domicile of the body, just as a weak elephant is incapable of pulling another that is stuck in the muddy pit. Of what good is affluence or royalty, this body and all its efforts to a person, when the hand of time must destroy them all in a few days? Tell me, O sage, what is charming in this body that is only a composition of flesh and blood, both within and without, and frail in its nature? The body doesn't follow the soul upon death. Tell me, sage, what regard should the learned have for such an ungrateful thing as this? It is as unsteady as the ears of an enraged elephant, and as fickle as drops of water that trickle on their tips. Sorry. I should like, therefore, to abandon it before it becomes to abandon me. It is as tremulous as the leaves of a tree shaken by a breeze, and oppressed by diseases and fluctuations of pleasure and pain. I have no relish in its pungency and bitterness, with all its food and drink for evermore. It is as tender as a leaflet, and it is reduced to leanness in spite of all our cares, and runs fast towards its dissolution. It is repeatedly subjected to pleasure and pain, and to the succession of affluence and destitution, without being ashamed of itself, as the shameless vulgar herd. Why nourish this body any longer, when after its enjoyment of prosperity and exercise of authority for a long time, it acquires no excellence or durability? The bodies of the rich and the poor are alike subject to decay and death at their appointed times. The body lies like a tortoise in the cave of greed amidst the ocean of the world. It remains there in the mud in a mute and torpid state, without any effort for its liberation. Our bodies float like heaps of wood on the waves of the world, finally serving as fuel for a funeral fire. Except a few which pass for human bodies in the sight of the wise. The wise have little to do with this tree of the body which is beset by evils like harmful orchids about it, and produces the fruit of perdition. The body, like a frog, lies merged in the mire of mortality, where it perishes no sooner it is known to have lived and gone. Our bodies are as empty and fleeting as gusts of wind passing over dusty ground. Nobody knows from where they come or where they go. We know not the travels of our bodies, as we do not know those of the winds, light, and our thoughts. They all come and go, but from where and to where, we know nothing. Fie and shame to them who are so giddy with the intoxication of their error that they rely on any state or durability of their bodies. They are the best of men, O sage, whose minds are at rest with the thought that their ego doesn't exist in their bodies, and that in the end the bodies are not theirs. Those mistaken men who have a high sense of honor and fear dishonor, but who take pleasure in the excess of their gains, are truly killers of both of their bodies and souls. We are deceived by the delusion of ego, which, like a female evil spirit, lies hidden within the cavity of the body with all her sorcery. Unaided, our reason is kept in bondage by the malicious feint of false knowledge, like a slave within the prison of our bodies. It is certain that whatever we see here is unreal, and yet it is a wonder that the mass of men are led to deception by the vile body, which has injured the cause of the soul. Our bodies are as fleeting as the drops of a waterfall. They fall off in a few days like the withered leaves of trees. They are as quickly dissolved as the bubbles in the ocean. Therefore, it is in vain for it to hull about in the whirlpool of business. I haven't a moment's reliance in this body which is ever hastening to decay, and regard its changeful delusion as a state of dreaming. Let those who have any faith in the stability of lightning, autumn clouds, and ice castles place their reliance in this body. In its instability and ability to perish, the body has outdone all other things that are doomed to destruction. It is moreover subject to very many evils, therefore I value it as nothing, like straw, and thereby I have obtained my rest. Thus ends chapter 18. So let us take another chapter, chapter 19, blemishes of boyhood. Ram is continuing speaking. One receiving his birth in the unstable ocean of this world, disturbed by the waves of the turmoil of business, has to pass his boyhood in sufferings only. The attendants of infancy are a lack of strength and sense, diseases, danger, muteness, and sensual desires, joined with longings and helplessness. The childhood is chained to fretting, crying, fits of anger, craving, and every kind of incapacity, like an elephant chained to a post. The vexations that tense the infant breast are far greater than those which trouble us in youth and old age, or disturb one in disease, danger, or at the approach of death. The acts of a boy are like those of young animals, always restless and snubbed by everybody. Hence, boyhood is more intolerable than death itself. How can any boyhood be pleasing to anybody, when it is a semblance of gross ignorance, full of whims and hobbies, and ever subject to improper behavior? Silly boyhood is in constant dread of dangers arising at every step from fire, water, and air, which rarely cause problems in other states of life. Children are liable to very many errors in their plays and wicked frolics, and in all their wishes and attempts beyond their capacities. Therefore, boyhood is the most dangerous stage of life. Children are engaged in false pursuits and wicked sports, and are subject to all other foolish childishness. Hence, boyhood is fit for the road and not for the rest. All faults, misconducts, transgressions, and heartaches like hidden in boyhood, like owls in hollow caves. Shame on those ignorant and foolish people who are falsely led to imagine boyhood as the most pleasant period of life. How can boyhood appear pleasing to anyone when the mind swings like a cradle towards every object of desire, however wrong it is deemed to be in both worlds? The minds of all living beings are ever restless, but those of young people are 10 times more at unrest. The mind is naturally unsteady, and so is boyhood. Say, what can save us from the state of life when both these vagrant things combine to our destruction? The glances of woman, the flashes of lightning, the flame of fire, and the ever rolling waves have all imitated the fickleness of boyhood. Minority seems to be a twin brother to the mind. They are similar in their unsteadiness and frailty of all their purposes. All kinds of miseries, misdeeds, and improper behavior await on boyhood, as all sorts of men hang upon the rich. Children are always fond of new things, and when they fail to get them, they fall to a fainting fit, as if from the effect of poison. A boy, like a dog, is as easily tamed as he is irritated at a little, and he is as glad to lie in the dust and play with the dirt. A foolish, fretful boy, with his boy daubed in mire, tears in his eyes, appears like a heap of dry clay soiled by a shower of rain. Children are subject to fear and voracious appetites. They are helpless but fond of everything they have seen or heard, and equally fickle in their bodies and mind. Hence, boyhood is a source of only troubles. The foolish and helpless child becomes sad and sore when he fails to get the object of his fancy, and thwarted from the thing desired. Children have much difficulty to get at the things they want and which they can ask only by indistinct words. Hence, no one suffers so much as children. A boy is as much irritated by the eagerness of his whimsical desires as a patch of ground in the desert is parched by the summer heat. On entering school, a boy is subjected to corrections which are as painful to him as goading and chains to an elephant. Boyhood, ever fond of toys and trifles, is continually afflicted by a great many whims and hobbies and a variety of false fancies. How can it be said that senseless childhood is a happy state of life, when the child is led by its ignorance to swallow everything in the world and to wish to lay hold on the moon in the sky? Say, great sage, what difference is there between a child and a tree? Both have sensitivity, but neither is able to defend themselves from heat and cold. Children are like birds, subject to fear and hunger, and ready to fly about when impelled by them. Boyhood is the home of fear from all sides, such as from the tutor, father, mother, elder brother, and elderly children, and from everybody besides. Hence, hopeless state of childhood, full of faults and error, and addicted to sports and thoughtlessness, cannot be satisfactory to anybody. Thus ends the chapter Boyhood. Now, there is another chapter 20, which is about youth, denunciation of youth. The boy, having passed his state of blemishes, gladly steps into youth with hope of gaining his objects that tend only to his ruin. At this time, the unconscious youth feels the wanton inclinations of his loose mind and goes on falling from one tribulation to another. He is overcome like one subdued by the power of delusive Kamdev, lying hidden in the cavity of the heart. His ungoverned mind gives rise to loose thoughts like those of voluptuous women, and these serve to beguile him like magic black collyrium eyeliner in the hands of the children. Vices of the most heinous kind overcome persons of such minds in their youth and lead them to their ruin. The paths of youth lead through a maze of errors to the gate of hell. Those who have been left uncorrupted by their youth are not to be corrupted by anything else. Whoever has passed the dreadfully enchanted coast of youth, filled with various flavors and wonders, is said to be a truly wise person. I take no delight in our unwelcome youth, which appears to us in the form of a momentary flash of lightning, soon followed by the loud roaring of the clouds. Youth, like rich wine, is sweet and delicious, but becomes bitter, insipid, and harmful in a short time. Hence, it is not delectable to me. Youth appearing as a reality is found to be a false, transient thing, as deceptive as a fairy dream by night. Hence, I like it not. It is the most charming of all things to man, but its charm is soon lost and fled. Therefore, the magic of lantern show of youth is not pleasing to me. Youth is like an arrow shot, pleasant to see but painful to feel. Hence, I don't like youth that produces heat in the blood. Youth is like a harlot, charming at first sight but soon turns heartless. Hence, it is not my liking. As the efforts of dying man are all for his torment, so the exertions of the young are portentous on his destruction. Puberty advances like a dark night spreading the shadow of destruction. It darkens the heart and mind by its hideous appearance and intimidates even the god Shiva himself. Errors growing in youth, upsetting good sense, and giving no value to approved good manners cause copious mistakes in life. The raging fire in the hearts of the young, caused by separation from their mates, burns them down like trees in a wildfire. As a clear, sacred, and wide stream becomes muddy during drains, so does the mind of man, however clear, pure, and expanded it may be, gets polluted in its use. It is possible for one to cross a river made terrible by its waves, but no way possible for him to get over the boisterous expanse of his youthful desires. Oh, how one's youth is worn out with the thoughts of his mistress, her swollen breast, her beautiful face, and her sweet caresses. The wise regard a young man afflicted with the pain of soft desire as no better than a fragment of straw. Youth is the stake of haughty self-esteem, as the rack is for the immolation of the elephant giddy with its frontal fear. Youth is a lamentable forest, where the mind, as the root of all, gives growth to jungles of groans, sighs, and tears of sorrow. The vices of this time are like venomous snakes of the forest. Know that a person's youthful bloom resembles a blooming lotus of the lake. One is as full of affections but bad desires and evil intents as other is filled with bees, filaments, petals, and leaves. The new bloom of youth is the playground of anxiety and disease, which, like two birds with their plumage of vice and virtue, frequent the fountain of the young man's heart. Early youth resembles a deep sea disturbed by the waves of numberless amusements, transgressing all bounds, and regardless of death and disease. Youth is like a furious gust of wind, overloaded with the dust of pride and vanity, which sweeps away every trace of good qualities. The root dust of the passions of youth disfigures their faces, and the hurricane of their sensualities cover their good qualities. Youthful vigor awakens a series of faults and destroys a group of good qualities by increasing the vice of pleasures. Youthful blooms confines the fickle mind to some beautiful person, like bright moonbeams, serve to trap the flitting bee in the dust of closing lotus. Youth, like a delightful cluster of flowers growing in the garden of the human body, attracts the mind to it like a bee and makes it giddy. The human mind, anxious to derive pleasure from the youthfulness of the body, falls into the cave of sensuality. Like a deer running after the mirage of desert, it falls down into a pit. I take no delight in moon-like youth, which guiles the dark body with its beams and resembles the stern mane of the lion-like mind. It is a surge in the ocean of our lives. There is no reliance upon youth that fades away as soon as summer flowers in this desert of the flower body. Like a bird, youth soon flies away from our bodily cage. It is like the philosopher's stone that quickly disappears from the hands of the unfortunate. As youth advances to its highest pitch, so the feverish passions wax stronger for our destruction only. As long as the night of youth lasts, the flames of our passion rage in the desert of the body. Pity me, O sage, in this stage of youth, which is so full of agitation as to have deprived me of the sight of reason. Oh, pity me as you would for your dying son. A fooling man who ignorantly rejoices at his transient youth is considered to be like a human beast. A foolish fellow who is fond of his youth, flushed with pride and filled with errors, soon comes to repent. Those who have safely passed over the perils of youth are great-minded men honored on earth. With ease, one can cross over a wide ocean that is the horrible home of huge whales. But it is hard to pass over youth that is so full of vices and waves. It is very rare to have a happy youth filled with humility and spent in the company of respectable men. Such youth is distinguished by feelings of sympathy and is joined with good qualities and virtues. Thus ends chapter 20, and now let us take chapter 21, which is denunciation of woman. Ram added, "What beauty is there in the body of a woman composed of nerves, bones, and joints? She is a mere statue of flesh and a frame of moving machinery with her ribs and limbs. Separated from its flesh, skin, blood, and water, can you find anything beautiful in the female form that is worth beholding? Then why dot upon it? This fairy frame, consisting of hair and blood, cannot engage the attention of a high-minded man to its blemishes. The bodies of females, so covered with clothing and repeatedly smeared with paints and perfumes, are devoured by carnivores. The breasts of women, decorated with strings of pearl, appear as charming as the pinnacles of Mount Sumeru, washed by the waters of the Ganges falling upon them. Look at these very same breasts in the end, having become a lump of food to be devoured by dogs in cemeteries and on the naked ground. There is no difference between a woman and a young elephant that lives in the jungle. Both are made of blood, flesh, and bones. Then why hunt after her? A woman is charming only for a short time. I look upon her merely as a cause of delusion. There is no difference between wine and a woman. Both tend equally to produce high flown mirth and jollity, creating revelry and lust. Overindulgent men are like chained elephants among mankind. They will never come to sense, however goaded by the hooks of the reason. Women are the flames of vice. Their black dyed eye and hair are their smoke and soot. Though pleasing to the sight, they are as intangible as fire. They burn a man like fire consumes straw. Though they appear soft and juicy to sight, they burn from afar and are as dry as bones. They serve as fuel for the fires of hell, and they are dangerous with their charm. The woman resembles a moonlit night, veiled over by her loosened locks and looking through her starry eyes. She saw her moon like face amidst her flowery smiles. Her soft dalliance destroy all manly energy, and her caresses overpower the good sense of man, like the shade of night does the sleeping. A woman is as lovely as a vine in its flowering time. Her palms are the leaves, and her eyes are the black bees. Her breasts are like the uplifted tops of the plant. A lovely maiden is like a poisonous vine, fair as the filament of a flower, but by causing inebriation and unconsciousness, destructive of life. Like the snake catcher entices the snake by his breath and brings it out of its hole, so does a woman allure a man by her meddlesome civilities and gets him under her control. Sexual desire, like a huntsman, has spread his nets in the form of women for the purpose of ensnaring deluded men like silly birds. The mind of man, though as fierce as that of a furious elephant, is tied fast by the chain of love to the fulcrum of woman, just as an elephant is fastened to the post where he remains dull and dumb forever. Human life is like a pool in which the mind moves about in mud and mire. Here it is caught by the weight of woman and dragged along by the thread of its impure desires. The beautiful eyed maiden is a bondage to man as the stable is to the horse, the fastening post to the elephant, and as spells are to the snakes. This wonderful world, with all its delights and enjoyments, began with woman and depends on woman for its continuance. A woman is a casket full of all gems of vice. She is the cause of our chain to everlasting misery, and she is of no use to me. What shall I do with her breast, her eyes, her loins, her eyebrows, the substance of which is only flesh, and which therefore is altogether unsubstantial? Here and there, O Brahmin, her flesh and blood and bones undergo a change for the worse in course of a few days. Sage, you can see those dearly beloved mistresses, so much fondled by foolish men, lying at last in the cemetery, their body parts all mangled and falling off. O Brahmin, those dear love objects, the faces of maidens so fondly decorated by their lovers with paints and pastes, are at last to be burned on the piles. Their braided hairs hang like fly whisks on the cemetery trees, and after a few days their whitened bones are strewn about like shining stars. Behold their blood sucked in by the dust of the earth, voracious beasts and worms feeding upon their flesh, jackals tearing their skin, and their vital air dispersed in the vacuum. This is the state to which the members of the female body must shortly come to pass. You say all existence is delusion, therefore tell me, why do you allow yourself to fall into error? A woman is nothing but a form of composed of five elements, so why should intelligent men be fondly attached to her? Man's longing for woman is like the Suta vine, which stretches its springs to a great length, but bears plenty of bitter and sour fruit. A man blinded by greed is like a deer that has strayed from its herd, not knowing which way to go, lost in the maze of illusion. A young man under the control of a young woman is as lamentable as an elephant in pursuit of his mate that has fallen into a pit of Vindhya mountain. He who has a wife has an appetite for enjoyment on earth, but one without her has no object of desire. Abandonment of the wife amounts to abandonment of the world, and forsaking the world is the path to true happiness. I am not content, O Brahmin, with these unmanageable enjoyments which are as flickering as the wings of bees and are as soon at an end as they are born. From my fear of repeated births, decay, and death, I long only for the state of supreme bliss. So, thus ends chapter 21, and we will end this session of today's here and now itself. I will say Shivoham to all my friends. Have a good day ahead. Shivoham.